and welcome to our episode 27, Sport Leadership, Innovative Programs Leveraging Sport for Human and Social Development, or Sport for Education. And we have some great guests today that I'll introduce in a moment. We always want to start by acknowledging, though, that we are operating as a university on the lands of the Lekwungen and Kusepsin First Nations. We also refer to those partners as Songhees and Esquimalt peoples. And it's really important at Rural Roads that we partner with our First Nations communities, because we are, of course, on unceded territories. And though we may not have inflicted harms upon these communities, we are responsible for trying to bring into reconciliation the values by which we operate. Royal Roads University has been around for over 25 years now, and I've been associated with the university for almost that length of time. It's quite hard to imagine, but fell in love with it because of their model: applied, caring, community-based, and transformational. Our mantra is we create life-changing experiences for others so that they can then foster transformational experiences for those in their communities. We try to learn from the 300 hectares of land that we are on in much the same way that I think athletes do, or anyone involved with sport or activity, as we're constantly being taught by the environment that we're operating within. Or I often say this skinny little boat teaches me something every day. Today I was in a crew of 4 and constantly reflecting on not just the tactical of the sport, but on what I'm learning as I repeat the same stroke over and over for thousands of times. And this is another way that we learn from our environment is culturally. So there are artifacts like this beautiful bridge that is on our campus in the Japanese garden. There are a number of gardens across the campus. And the bridge for us in the School of Communication, of course, represents the importance of embracing diversity. And we have this tagline we operate by, which is that we first must mind the gap before we can bridge the gap. So appreciating how we're different before we try to build connections. And welcome to everyone who's joining us today. We will record this session, of course, and we will share that recording afterward, and you can share it with whomever you like. Hello, Peter, good to see your face. And yes, feel free to turn on your videos, because it's just great to really operate as a community. This is a discussion of the concept of how sport can be leveraged as an educational vehicle. So we invite all voices in, but we do have special guests. And we've seen it, sport has been used as a way, as a platform, a vehicle for teaching concepts, for learning concepts that apply to the world, whether it's about equity or human rights or fairness or access. We can see all of these sport organizations that are happening and being formed off the field in order to leverage what's happening on the field. And at Rural Roads, we really believe in all of these concepts as well, and try to mirror those in the same way that sport often offers us a mirror for what's going on in our society. And so our schools are all organized and coalesce around these kind of concepts as well. We also have partnerships. We have a flexible admission policy, and this is particularly relevant to athletes because what you're learning through sport, of course, is treated in the same way we treat professional experience in our programs, and we give credit for it. We know that you've learned about communication, collaboration, cultural development, intercultural development, and competence. Those kinds of things are relevant to the learning outcomes in all of our programs. We have programming that relates to sport. You can customize any of our programs with a sport focus, though, for your research, but we also partner with organizations like the CFL Players Association to teach leadership to aging football players and others. And we also work with Game Plan to make sure that those athletes that are nearing the end of their careers understand that they have opportunities actually throughout their careers, but also after. And so we began with sport leadership, innovative programs, leveraging sport for human and social development. So that it's not just about educating the individual, but also we're developing these brilliant people, leaders, yes, physically, but emotionally, socially, but also with an environmental conscience, because we're launching them through sport and out of sport into the community. And so we want to make sure they're learning as much as possible from sport. And sport has so much to teach. I want to highlight that we already had some great guests. Oh, and these are fantastic people. I really encourage you to listen to the recording. I've posted on social and highlighted some of the great insights that were shared by these brilliant leaders. And of course, today we also have 3 guests from different organizations. So I'll introduce them briefly now, but then we begin by really giving people an opportunity to tell a little more about themselves, their roles, and the work that they're doing. We have Lindsay Wright. Lindsay is the Executive Director of In Motion Network. We have Ben Aren, who's from the Research and Evaluation Coordinator from MLSE Launchpad. And you'll hear lots about some of the programs that these 2 individuals are fostering. And then we also have the Canadian Sports School, represented by Daryl DeLue, who's the teacher lead in the program. And I've just enjoyed meeting all of you and also reading up on the work that you're doing or hearing about it in different avenues. So let's get started. I want to highlight all of these individuals you can follow on various social media platforms, but everyone has a presence on LinkedIn, and highlight some of the next webinars coming up, some of the topics we're working on, but also invite you to send me an email anytime or a text letting me know of ideas that you have. I've had suggestions from people about, the state of soccer in Canada, for instance. And I also welcome you. We'll have a chat and we'll be monitoring the chat, and we can see people participating now, which is great to see. Yeah, excellent. Good. Thank you. And any feedback you want to give us, that's great. But if you have questions, you can post them in the chat. I'll monitor it as we go. We'll try to respond as they're relevant, or wait till the end if it can wait, and have a good discussion later. And we'll invite you to turn on your mic. I think Ariana has to give you the goods to be able to do that. Ariana, thank you so much. Ariana works at Railroads with me, and we're a team in providing this webinar. And so I'll just stop there. I got a couple little clips that I'll share. Actually, why don't I start with that? I'm going to share a couple of the clips from In Motion Network. My first question is, tell us a bit about yourself and your role and the kind of work that you're doing in your organization. So I'll ask Lindsay if she'll start, but I wanted to share a couple of clips that we have from In Motion to demonstrate the disparate programming that's occurring here. They're just...
To graduate high school, you need phys ed 10, and that does not work for a lot of the young women here. There's the basketball, the volleyball, so the outcomes of that. So we were looking at taking these girls who don't fit into the traditional phys ed 10 outcome, and then trying to figure out outcomes and activities too, so they can loop back and get those credits they need to graduate.
But you guys are you're really inspiring, and you really bring me a lot of motivation, because you guys, you carry a lot of power, even though you're young people. You may not have big roles within your families or your communities, but you are the future change makers. You're the future leaders, the future decision makers, and you guys are the ones who are going to be in leadership roles, and sooner than you think. It's really my goal to let youth know that you belong in sports, you belong in wellness, you belong in these spaces.
One of the projects, and I'll carry on and share one more. Again, just a minute long, but you can see even that first one, the idea of learning to feel empowered and recognize your role in society, but the opportunity that the sport actually provides as a learning vehicle.
My name is Karina Brandea. I've been teaching Zumba at Sage Building for over 3 years. Teaching seniors is very rewarding. They learn a lot, they improve their balance, and they come here to socialize. So whenever they come here, I think they become a family.
My name is Mabel Gordon, and I am 77 years old. First of all, Sage is a godsend, because there's so many people who have access to come in and enjoy the program. It would be very beneficial if we have the Zumba ongoing, because it helps, especially the seniors, to move, to keep them active, and also a place to go to.
Thank you. So Lindsay, can you tell us a bit more about the programs, how those feature within your grander roster of programs in your organization, and a little bit more about yourself as well, the role you play?
Yes, thanks so much for having me. And I can't take credit for the details of things that are happening in those programs because those programs are both really driven by that community. And in some, like for example, with the girls program, that was years of work from some other organizations, and we were able to support the physical activity component. But I'm here in Treaty 6 territory as the executive director of the In Motion Network for Alberta. And so we're a small multi-sport, not-for-profit. And our organization is working towards a provincial sport and recreation and physical activity system that recognizes that equity is fundamental to ensuring girls and women in all of their diversity have the opportunity to meaningfully participate as leaders, coaches, officials, athletes, participants, and administrators. And so we know that there's many barriers affecting women and many intersecting barriers affecting women and their participation and access to different opportunities. And so we work to support sport organizations, but as you can see, many community organizations to address the barriers that they're impacting women and girls so that they can create positive opportunities in their community. So I know that those two projects both those videos are quite impactful because they show a lot of the things that I think are really important in terms of community building, relationship building, and also the sense of belonging that participants feel when they're attending these programs with their community and enjoying the activities.
Love it. I love how Karina highlighted that practical things like balance as well, right? So we're learning these practical things no matter what, but also then all these other components of how important it really is to have a place to go. That was interesting too. And the environment that you're creating, the place, the programming that's so necessary. That came up a lot in our previous webinar with True Athlete Project too, that the intervention of creating these spaces, places, and programs. Thanks so much, Lindsay. And how about Daryl? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and your program at Canadian Sports School?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jen. So this is my first year working with the Canadian Sports School. We are partnered with PICE, which is the Pacific Institute for Sport Education, located on the Camosun College campus. And we also partner with the Canadian Sport Institute. Our program is, I guess, a specialty program for local grade 10 to 12 students who are looking to supplement their training with us. So they spend half a day with us every week, and we work on things such as strength training, gymnastics and mobility, and speed training. And we also have weekly seminars that range from leadership to nutrition to biomechanics to physiology, the whole gamut. So we really have a kind of real supportive program in their development.
Yeah, and I've mentioned that I've come in and for years, actually many years, I think right from the beginning. And then I had a daughter who participated and her friends, and always kind of knew the kids, you know, because of the community that were participating in this program. But it is so much more than preparing for elite level sport, right? They're learning so much more.
Oh yeah, and they learn from each other too, right? And they're all come from different backgrounds and different sports, and they are trying to excel in their sport, and they're all at different levels when they start. But it's just fun to see them interact, and you see, you know, the younger students who are in grade 10 who might be in soccer interacting with students who are a couple years older, and just kind of learning through them, and kind of that exposure is just fun to watch.
Yeah, really building a culture within your cohort and also learning to be a leader within that cohort. Such a great opportunity, and trying to take it out. And you invite all sorts of different kinds of speakers to come in along with the nutritional and the.
Oh yes. We this week we had the Women's Transition House about healthy relationships, right? So I'm talking about abuse and consent. You know, we have the full gamut of positive information for them, right? Whether it's just through sport or for their life in general.
And constantly that message to be, I feel that they're very good no matter how young, because they're quite young, grade 10 to 12, right? And at distilling what they are learning through their actual sport as well. Wonderful to see. And Ben and I met at the Spry conference recently, and I was just so impressed with the programs he was sharing, but also Ben himself. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role and the work you do.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me. Can you guys all hear me well? We're all good? Awesome. So my name is Ben. You can call me Benji. I am the coordinator of research and evaluation at MLSC Launchpad and MLSC Foundation, so Maple Leaf Sport Entertainment. Launchpad essentially is a huge sport for development facility, about 42,000 square feet, and it's an extension of our foundation team. And essentially, we run a lot of different programs with the main goal of utilizing sport to help youth develop their potential. So we run a lot of different programs, and we run these programs intentionally. And my job is essentially, I'm on the ground at Launchpad and in the foundation community, and I'm making sure that a lot of the programs that we're running are actually working. We have a theory of change that looks at different life skills, that looks at different pillars that we run on. And we want to make sure that the things that we are saying that we want to do is not only being enforced by research, but we're actually improving on those programs every single time. And it's amazing. We run different programs in Launchpad. We run different programs outside of the community. We have a lot of different partners. We do a lot of different things with our main teams, like the Maple Leafs, the Toronto Argonauts, the Toronto Raptors. And yeah, I just try to bring the data to life. And so, yeah, it's been an amazing time there. This is my first year there, and it's just been incredible. And we're continuing to do different things to try to use sport as this vehicle that we're going to talk about today, and the ways in which we can create innovative programs to continue to do this. So yeah, that's a little bit of a nutshell of MLSC Launchpad and the foundation team and what we do here.
And it's kind of a secret, I find. I think people need to go look at it and go get online, look at all the stuff that you do. But I think because you're so focused on delivering programming and making it sure it works, that was your message at the conference too, that is it actually having an impact? It's not just, something that's shiny that looks good for promotional purposes. We want to make sure we're actually having an impact. What do you find? Is there a program that really sticks out for you, or an experience that you've witnessed that you find, oh man, yeah, that is working, or that has a great potential to really have a future here?
Yeah, so ironically, the one that I presented at our Square conference, so we had a sport and STEM program, and I always like to use the spinach and the smoothie analogy, where we try to utilize our platform and all the opportunities that we have to deliver sport, and we include different things, different other avenues. So like the sport and STEM program, we essentially have it's a school day program where we engage a number of schools in the GTA area and the middle school ages, and we essentially create different programs, and our sport programming team creates these programs, and then we have partners like Fuel for Fun, or Visions of Science, and we bring them in and we try to teach kids or youth how to understand STEM concepts better, or understand opportunities in STEM utilizing sport, and analyzing the data there and looking at all the different things that we were doing with that program, and seeing youth actually before the program to after the program being like, oh my goodness, I didn't even understand that the glucose molecule worked this way, but playing soccer and doing this and running these different things this way really gave me a better perspective. So that was one of many programs that we run that really opens doors, utilizes sport intentionally to teach youth how to do different things that you wouldn't even think that you could do. So I think that's a great way that MLSC is super intentional with running these different approaches.
Love it, yeah, and embedding it in something you really care about, right? If they're already feeling quite happy and confident in the sport realm, and then they start seeing how it connects to, I still have to connect you to the Women in Sports Science Network. I think that might be another group to bring in and show how sports science is so relevant to them. Thank you. All right, and now I also want to hear a little more about from each of you, and anybody can go first, but tell me a bit more about, why sport? Why have you all ended up in the sport realm, that sports sector? Why do you stick with sport in the first place? Why have you committed to it? I know you all have different sport backgrounds as well, so maybe tell us a bit about that. Anybody want to start?
I can start out. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I had a bee flew in front of me.
Okay, yeah, so I can get into it. So for me, I had sport kind of basically changed my life. I grew up in Toronto. I immigrated to Canada at a very young age. And, sport provided an outlet for me that I didn't realize until later down the line. I went to Queen's University and played football there for a couple of years. And I also coached football for a while, and as any individual going through this in this elite athletic career, you think, oh, I'm gonna go play pro, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way for me. But after taking a step out of sport and understanding the different things that it did for me to allow me to succeed in academics, allow me to achieve my master's, allow me to take all the skills into now my role that I'm in here. Sport has just been such an integral part of my life, and I want to be able to provide these opportunities for youth that may not have access to organized sport, like a sport like football or hockey, which is extremely expensive to just be able to be a part of. Being able to go through the experience that I went through and being privileged enough to be where I am right now, I want to be able to provide that change, and I want to be able to contribute utilizing sport, because I'm a living example of the power, the evidence of what sport can do when its power is harnessed. So that's my answer. I'll let someone else go. Yeah.
I just want to probe a little more, because I've heard that so often, sports changed my life, it saved my life. But can you distill what it is that really made a difference for you because of the football, because of the sport experiences? How did that kind of launch you, or what specifically do you take from it? What do you think?
I think that's a really great question. I think sport is surprisingly, it's an amazing metaphor for our life. It's an amazing, there's so many different things that you do, especially going through football, the ups and downs, the wins, the losses, the work ethic, the time management, being at a school like Queen's University, which is extremely academically demanding, and asking myself, okay, I want to be able to have this GPA so I can keep my scholarship, but I also want to be able to succeed well. I want to be able to do well in school. I think sport has a way of, again, I'm always going to resort back to the spinach and the smoothie analogy. Sport is fun. Youth they want to play soccer, they want to play football, they want to do all these different things. But there also are so many different things that are included in sport that you don't even realize that is beneficial to them as they go down the line. So I think for me, it's just the ability to be able to really look back and ask myself these questions and ask myself, why am I the way I am? And be able to relate that back to the experiences that I had in sport is extremely integral. And I love the sport for development research field, where researchers are now really diving into these things and, trying to figure out ways in which we can continue to highlight those traits.
So much motivation. And yeah, it all just comes down to that it's fun. It's you're passionate, you love it, it feels good. And that can be such a source of energy and confidence going forward. And you're constantly learning, hey, always learning.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. And Daryl, you're on deck. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been in sport all my life, growing up in Ontario to start, just playing soccer in the summer times. And when we moved here at a young age, all of a sudden, hey, soccer turned into the winter time. I could play another sport. So suddenly you pick up baseball, and as you keep progressing, you get to meet lots of wonderful teammates, right? And these teammates that you become friends for life with. It's just, I remember going on the bike to Lochside Park all the time, and just, you go grab your buddy and you go to practice, right? And, you do that from a young age. And, eventually getting into other sports with basketball, and suddenly rowing came on my lap with my PE teacher in grade 9, who said, hey, yeah, you really should come try it. And, it worked out really well for me in that avenue. And I think, being involved in sport helped me decide on what career I wanted to have. I knew that I enjoyed helping others and supporting them, if my friends needed help with their math class or something like that, helping them out. But at the same time, I also saw these wonderful role models that were around me growing up, that I was just like, hey, this looks like a lot of fun, right? Whether it was my coach or PE teacher or another teacher, I gained a lot of really positive relationships with them, and it kind of helped set my career path. And so I've been coaching ever since I graduated from high school, even while I was rowing at UVic. just here and there with the high school program that runs out of Elk Lake here in Victoria, where I met Jen years and years ago. And yeah, it's just been great, right? So as soon as injuries happen and you move on from high performance sport, I managed to finish my degree and get right into teaching. And it's just so fun meeting wonderful students who just want to do their best, right? They might be something brand new and they have to learn, and it just it might be super strong, but all of a sudden you have to learn how to apply your body in different ways, and might not be the strongest person who's the fastest, and they have to figure things out on their own. In rowing, you take a stroke every 3 seconds or so. So you have, 3-second loops of feedback. Hey, how did I do? Right. And you're just trying to perfect this. But, I've been fortunate to work in programs where we have, instead of just 10-week programs, I've got 10-month programs that I've worked with at Claremont with the Rowing Academy, or Shawnigan Lake School and St. George's School with their rowing teams that run year round, and just get to meet really awesome individuals who just want to push themselves and help them meet their goals. And it's just fun to see them develop.
During COVID, our family reflected on how none of us were out of a job because we're all in service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it really I think it really helped our kids realize how important that is to the world, right? Because usually it's a bit invisible, you're in the background, but
yeah,
it brought it into stark relief for sure. Thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to highlight Daryl's leadership capacity. I just remember him transforming the high school program and getting everybody working together finally with some insightful solutions to things that probably should have been obvious to us, but people are too busy banging their head against each other. So a real conflict mediator as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
you get to wear multiple hats, and just have to think about the hat you're wearing and try to make the best decisions for the kids.
That's it, eh? Keeping that focus. And that's another thing we learn from sport, isn't it? What's our actual focus? Okay, why are we even here? And Lindsay, can you tell us a bit about your journey into sport? Why are you still here?
Yeah, I feel like once you're in, you're kind of in, especially for some of us that have been around for a long time. And I think I'll even maybe start there. I know working in this sector pretty much my whole career, it is quite the community, and there's lots of the same faces and support network that you have working in the sector. So I know that's something that I definitely value. I grew up, in the late 80s, 90s, and we spent a lot of time outside, and I was outside all the time doing a lot of unstructured activities. We'd play pickup sports all over the place. So I feel like I really got a great multi-sport experience in my youth, and I was also extremely shy. So that was one thing that I was good at, was my physical skills. And I feel like I had a lot of great coaches and teachers that really supported me to build my confidence through using some of my sports skills and abilities and leadership opportunities in athletics. So I played pretty much every sport available to me. I grew up went to small schools, so I was able to play all the sports. I lost a lot of games over and over again and learned what that felt like. And then I actually ended up playing field lacrosse. So that was my sport for many, many years. And I coached here in Alberta for many years after that. And now I still am, going to my over 40 indoor soccer league and participating there. And I also just still like to be outdoors and kind of live in the same neighborhood that I did when I was younger. So I think for me, a lot of the skills that I developed were around leadership skills, confidence, and also just, like I said, the community that I feel a part of, and just those friendships and relationships that I was able to develop throughout that time.
Isn't it? And I love your reference to, you can just keep going, the sport for life concept, right? And we were hearing lots about that at the recent Scry conference as well, about how important it is to just have that mindset that we can keep doing this. We don't stop, no matter what it is. There's always an accommodation that will allow you to continue, and how important that is for everybody's just sense of well-being. Wonderful.
Yeah, and I think too, I know that in our work here, I really try to think about that as we're working through and supporting projects and partners, because your life changes so many times. And, you know, whether you have an injury or you have a family or your work comes up, you know, these things impact your ability and time, you know, financial impacts that might impact how you can participate at all. So really being aware that it's not always going to be the same. You know, some people play the same activity or sport their whole life, but many don't. So how are we really bringing in people at different times in their lives and supporting them through my program and then a different program so that they're really able to participate as they want to, when they want to, throughout their lifetime?
Yeah, because I think barriers come up quite a bit for a lot of the programs we're trying to support, don't we? And things that are getting in the way or changes, right? Barriers, changes, challenges that come up. And how do we continue to support people through all of those? But we again can learn from sport. We've talked a bit about this already, but I want to keep pressing for, you know, what is it about sport that really offers us this learning opportunity? I mean, it's such a range of programs. And some is around leadership, some is about, you know, recognizing you have the right to be participating, and here are the ways, and learning the ways that you can participate. And with Benji, this creative idea of how sport can actually connect you to different kinds of learning and make it more palatable or more understandable. What is it about sport that makes it such a great tool? Because I would argue it's like the best tool in the whole world. What do you think?
I can go first.
Oh, no, you take it.
Sorry.
It's your time. Your time.
You guys are in parallel, yes.
I know, right? I was just waiting. I was like, oh, okay.
Yes, I paused and then, okay, might as well. Yeah, so anyways, I think, you know, it's something, I mean, I talked to my students this morning, just asking them some of these questions just to get their thoughts, right? Because I'm curious what they think helps them on and off the field, you know, and some comments came up where it was, you know, able to find what values you have, you know, especially when things are at stake and you have to push yourself. Discipline, where you have to schedule everything, you have to work on time management, have a consistent work ethic. And then, you know, you're just not learning a sport or a skill, but you are you're learning how to problem solve and leadership skills. And you have to trust those around you. You have to trust yourself. You know, can my body do this? Can I keep going? And you challenge yourself, right? Were some of the topics that they brought up, right? Some of the headlines. And it's just, you know, fun to, I think, engage students in trying to, you know, it's not me who has to decide what you feel, but hey, what do you think you get out of this? So I think it was a fun little exercise we did this morning. But, you know, overall, they learn so much where, like, you know, I love giving students responsibility, and all of a sudden, you know, it's their job to take down a boat, right? In Rome, we've got boats that cost from $50,000 to $10,000, right? Way more expensive than my car. And it's like, yeah, go ahead, carry this boat, put it in the water, right? And they have to do it. And you teach them how to do it, and they take that responsibility, right? They have to learn about steering and how to communicate with their teammates, you know, come up with a race plan, or all these different opportunities where, you know, I've seen students where they might not be the strongest in the classroom, but all of a sudden, hey, you give them a job and they are just on it. And it's just really fun to be around. So, and, you know, you get to meet some really like-minded individuals as well, right? It's just these people that become your friends for life, just like you meet and you get into certain programs after high school, and hey, you're really into this program as well. It's just these people that you meet, right? People who want to do similar things. So it's kind of fun in that way. And just having competition, whether it's high-end competition or recreational, you know, everyone, it's important to compete at whatever level you're at so that you have fun, right? And that kept coming up too with my students, right? They just want to have fun and enjoy it so they can be in the moment and want to be there.
And I mean, we can talk about competition as well, just as a unique feature of sport, and how much how essential it is, and yet how we struggle to really understand what that is all about or what it's for. But really it is just to make it a little more fun, because you learn more and challenge each other. And you see older kids adapting to allow the younger kids to be able to compete on an even ground, right? So it's really cool to watch kids figure that out. So the nature of sport has so much to teach, but the environment sports in as well. And I mean, how is it different from theater or any other activity that we can participate in? You know, what are the other features? It's often in a different environment, and there are all these other features of sport that help us. I love it. Thank you. And Ben, you can say.
Yeah, you hit so many of my points. I think that was great.
That's why I wanted to go first.
I think I'll summarize it really quick. I think that sport is it's an incredible vehicle to build resilience and to connect with individuals. I know for me, from my personal experience, going through sport, you have different things that happen to you that you can't control, right? And that's life, right? There's a lot of different things that happen to you that are completely outside of your control. The highs and lows of life, sport teaches you that adversity builds character. Sport teaches you that you're going to practice your butt off, and there's a chance you might not win, but you continue to push. And I think that's where the gap between playing sport and understanding its power comes in, where you understand that that's essentially life, right? There's going to be external factors that you have no control of. You can train for every single day all summer so that you can thrive on the field, but you might get injured your first day back in practice or something. But you have to continue to move forward. You have to build that mental toughness. And I think, the ability of sport to allow, especially youth coming from, if you played soccer, played football, whatever you've done your whole life, you want it. The minute you're able to bridge that gap and understand when that sport, if it doesn't work out, that this is just what life is, I think it's amazing. And that's why I'm so grateful that there are organizations that are intentionally doing this to connect that to bridge that gap, to help youth understand that, hey, these things that you're going through in sport, you bounce back. That's life, right? And so that's why, from my personal experience, I think sport is so powerful, because it just, again, it's a perfect metaphor for a lot of the things that we go through. It's a perfect analogy for a lot of things that we go through in life. So, yeah, that's a little bit of why I think sport is so powerful.
Like the tolerance for ambiguity, right? Accepting what you can't control, huge learning. And it's almost like a superhuman confidence, isn't it? That you start to realize I actually can't control everything, which actually brings me a lot of peace in this moment. I'll just adapt and respond. And we're just here to learn. Lindsay, how about you? What do you think it is about sport that offers you such a great medium? Peter Baxter came up with that word, and it's a really good different word than vehicle, but a medium with which to work to achieve your goals in your organization.
Yeah, and I think both other speakers had just, a lot of echoing the same comments that I had listed. But I think one of the other things I just wanted to mention was around like the unplanned outcomes. So all the time when you're sitting and waiting, or you're on the bus, or you have to walk somewhere, and all those times where you're building relationships with each other, coaches, other teams, athletes, participants. I remember quite a few years ago, there was a teacher that was talking about how they were having a hard time connecting with their high school students, and unintentionally they planned to, go to this pond for water reading for a science class, and they had to walk there, and the walk was 10 minutes. And he was so surprised at how much that class came together, because they had that 10-minute walk before they got to their activity for their learning. And so I always think of that too. And so what do those times look like? And usually that's when a lot of the relationships are built. That's when you're talking about, what's going to happen, how did we do? There's just lots of skills and opportunities for building character building opportunities within those like unplanned outcomes that happen when you're with others in those kinds of settings.
And that leads to, I'll come back to the transformative question I had for all of you, but that leads to this idea that we kind of assume that sport is just inherently good. This comes up a lot in the research, that the trouble is this assumption isn't actually true. It doesn't always have to work. It doesn't always actually facilitate a positive experience for people, or they don't even always learn. You know, sometimes it can be a really devastating experience. And Jay Coakley is writing in the US about this. He calls it the sport myth. But so what does that mean? Well, it means intervention, like all of you, you know, you're providing opportunities. Lindsay's pointing out this idea. Imagine if all coaches thought a little more holistically, and not just coaches, sport leaders, sport administrators. You've got a bigger environment than just the field or the pitch or the court or the pool. You've got that walk and maybe factor that kind of stuff in, right? Imagine if people thought that way. What else? What are some elements that need to be in place to really leverage the medium of sport? What do you think contribute? What are some critical factors that need to be in place for sport to live up to its promise, its potential, to be leveraged in a productive way? What are some things you've discovered? And I invite our participants to weigh in the chat like Peter has done as well. Anybody comments on that?
Yeah, so again,
you go ahead, Benji, you're first.
We're on the same wavelength, man. I'll just be really quick with this one. Yeah, so the great sport myth, actually, that's a very, very great concept, because yeah, I think oftentimes we automatically assume, just because the research says that there's a lot of positive outcomes that we see, that everything, like, let's just go all in on it. I think the key word that I like to use a lot of the time is, like, sport has the potential to help youth develop positive outcomes. Potential. When that potential isn't tapped into, or when the right personnel or people are not helping youth actualize this potential, it can be very detrimental. You know, think about a university athlete, student athlete, star of the team, gets away with whatever they want. They get to go to practice. They're not being held accountable. That has the potential to build a very to not develop these positive outcomes that we see sport bring. So I think some of the different things is, I think coaches need to be very intentional, and sport leaders, as you said, need to be very intentional in looking at things in a different way. For example, lessons, not losses. You know what I mean? Like, different ways of showing that, you know, we're not focusing on the outcome here, we're focusing on the process. We might lose, but how do we learn from that loss? Really being intentional with communicating those messages during, you know, the sport activity that you're going through. And then training, at MLSC, we have these different programs called Train the Trainer approaches, and really figuring out ways where people in places that, like, we are doing the research, doing the work to be intentional with the things that we're doing. We're communicating that information. Like, knowledge translation is very important in communicating to these individuals. These are the things that we need to do intentionally to see these positive outcomes. Because yeah, like, sport does have the power to develop bad outcomes as well. If we aren't more intentional with the way that we coach and we translate knowledge to. So that's mine. Daryl, take it away.
I think that was great, Benji. Yeah, it's, you know, there's so much that you can have with sport. You know, I think of what Lindsay was talking about, right? Just having that time on the walk, right? I've been fortunate where I've taken athletes, you know, across the country, and we're away for a week. And, you know, these athletes, you know, they see me as soon as I wake up from my room, and I go and grab breakfast, and, you know, downstairs in the lobby, and, you know, I'm still sleepy just like them, right? You know, I'm just not perfect. And, you know, it's just these extra bonus times, right? And I've had so many parents where it's like, oh, you know, it's my first time letting our kids go away without us, right? And they just, you know, thank you for taking them. They had such a great time, right? And they just learned so much, right? You know, we always talk about, you know, expectations and everything like that, right? And they always rise up to those expectations. And it's important for coaches to set those out, because, yeah, without them, without clear direction, right? It's not, nobody likes it, right? As much as you think, hey, rules aren't good, those expectations are helpful, and it helps guide them. And yeah, building that resilience, right? You know, in our sport, or my main sport, you know, racing against other crews. We're not competing against them directly in terms of like an offense defense. And so all we can do is control ourselves, right? So working on that process and trying to maximize your speed and having your best race. And guess what? At the end of it, right, no matter what place you come, that's the first question, right? How did it go? Not how did you do, but how did it go? And then from then on, if we have other competitions against those same teams, you know, the goal is to narrow the gap with the team ahead of you, right? If you're in 5th place, hey, let's try to get a little bit closer to 4th, right? And just move our way up. And that's how we're going to measure ourselves. And it's just helpful to not focus on, again, just the outcome, but focus on the process.
Yeah, so many great lessons, and so important. I like how you said setting the expectations is important to leverage and first of all understand, like Lindsay was raising, that the sport setting is broader than just the narrow in the boat or on the water, but then to use it, okay? And as a coach, be responsible for setting the intention of that time, and without being oppressive. I mean, you don't want to, you must walk this way on 10-minute walk, but setting those expectations that tie to the values. Okay, what else? What do you think is critical, Nancy?
I think I know sometimes even just like I work at a more of a provincial level, so I am looking at the system and the sports system, and sometimes even thinking of the term sport for development sometimes is confusing. Like I'm not coming here to come in and tell you what to do or how to implement your program. So I know sometimes like the term itself and the work that's happening maybe isn't, I don't know if there's like a disconnect there. But, you know, working provincially and knowing, you know, the sport and recreation physical activity system in general was like rooted in history with, you know, racism, sexism, all sorts of systems that we still build on today. So I think that that video clip kind of touched on some of those things, you know, building a big facility, you know, taking a part of a community away, or what does that look like? So, you know, how are we challenging these systems, and how can we actually take a look at what we can do to impact these systems to actually make them for people to participate versus just always doing it the same way. So, you know, thinking about building recreation facilities and programs, you know, are they being built the same way we always built them because that's the way we do it, or are we building them this way because that's what best suits the community, or who's going to attend, or why they want to attend? So yeah, I think that there's a lot of work to be done around that area. And then also we've been doing a lot of work around safe and welcoming environments to support some of the sport organizations as they work on safe sport and EDI work within the organizations, you know, mental health supports, providing education, you know, supporting them with policy development so they can actually look at how they're changing the way that they're working to better support the entire system and everyone who's participating.
Yeah, because it is, you know, in parallel or embedded within our society. So it reflects, of course, as people have said, it's a metaphor, it's a mirror, it's a microcosm of society in so many ways, like education, like the health sector, like theater, literature, these other endeavors we take part in. And so really recognizing the broader impact, but also the broader responsibility we have, hey, through sport. Some will argue, though, that sport is just sport, man. Just let them play and quit with all the big goals and attention to, you know, its promise and potential to develop citizens. Like, they're football players, you know. What do you think, Ben?
I feel like that's a tough one, because I feel like a lot of times right now with, you know, the whole sport for development idea and all the positive outcomes that come with sport, it almost makes it seem like the fun part is being taken away. Like it makes it seem like, oh, it's just, but I think it's really important to understand that a lot of these outcomes are byproducts. The fun isn't going anywhere, right? I think that's something that needs to be emphasized. And we ensure that, like at Launchpad, it's never okay, this is what you're going to learn, this is what you're going to do. Because especially for you too, we have an age group of 6 to 9. some 6-year-old, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds don't understand what resilience is. They don't understand what, you know what I mean? So we need to make sure that we're being, as the researchers, that you are being intentional in understanding that, okay, the fun part is the main goal, the main outcome. Sport for development does not put sport at a detriment. It does not take that away. I think it's just a matter of it's tough because it's a matter of just communicating that and understand that you're not losing anything by trying to help with or try to help individuals develop these positive outcomes. It's just a byproduct. So it's an amazing byproduct, right? But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
I'd love to invite Peter Baxter. You've been commenting in the chat, and if those who don't know Peter, he was at Laurier for many years as an athletic director, and we've known each other for quite a while, but has been in that educational setting, in the university setting, but facilitating this kind of culture too, or trying to. And you've made some great comments in the chat. Do you want to comment on this concept, Peter? For it.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank the speakers because I think they've articulated and given examples of great ways to integrate sport in different ways. You know, Ben talked about bringing science in, and you know, sport can be a great hook for people to launch their academic careers or their professional careers in that side. You know, Derry talked about conflict resolution and on that side, and Lindsay, you know, I think with both lifelong, we have to look at sport in the continuum of physical movement. You know, one of the things that I'm involved with right now, and on my new chapter, I don't call myself retired. You know, I was at Laurier for 24 years and U of T Mississauga 7 as an athletic director, but now I'm moving in a different area. But one of my volunteer areas is I'm working with Athletics Ontario to possibly get a track and field facility or a running facility. And initially, I didn't want to be involved because they wanted just to look at it as a track facility. You can't do that anymore. You have to engage different groups. And one of the things I insisted, because here in Kitchener-Waterloo, 8 miles of each side of the Grand River is ceded to Six Nations. And I said, well, if I'm going to start, I said, I need to have the Indigenous people right from the very beginning, not in the middle of the consultation, but right in the middle. Because, and to be honest, you know, I also have some other cultural groups that are involved that won't be involved with sport, because if you're going to build a facility like an indoor track and field facility, it needs to be used for everything. And it's been, you know, I had some opposition with people to invite other groups in. And, you know, within sport, we got to kind of make sure that we do a consultation. We might have differences of opinion in different things, but, you know, not one person has the best solution. A lot of times it's there, and it you know, learning from Six Nations and the Akwesasne about the importance of community and making the decision, not one individual, is there, and that kind of reflects now with even the management style that we have. And part of it is, I mentioned about urbanization. In 2030, most of the Canada and North America, Asia will be urbanized. And I've been working with an urban planner that talks about the difference, because we were sort of ingrained, and sport was too, with the Industrial Revolution. You know, people had specific jobs and they kind of worked, lived, and played. Military complex, you know, colonialism, hierarchy. The difference is with urbanization is you have to have the concept that these urban planners have is you reverse work plus living plus play, That doesn't equal joy. Joy equals, is the formula, is play, live, and work. And when you read all the new management material about how to engage people, even in safe sport, it's not the top down. You have to empower people with compassion and empathy, with a focus, which I've heard from your speakers about focusing in on the athlete or the senior fitness person or whatnot. That's what it's all about. And so, the medium of sport can also break down things. I spent a lot of time in universities trying to understand, trying to convince academics who hold the purse strings for sport and recreation that we're part of the educational mission of the university. And, people like Ben, at least at Laurier, our student athletes were 5% higher academically than a non-athlete. It was about 9, or in terms of when I say graduation rate, not academic marks, but graduation rate was about 5 to 6% higher. So sport has a very powerful effect. It does have some downsides, right? And we have to address those. But we're part of society, so there's always going to be the negatives in there. And a lot of times, like having a program that Dairy has in with consent, and I'm sure there's other education to prevent sexual assault and harassment in working with athletes. We certainly did that. Working with men too on masculinity issues, so because they've got to be part of the solution. So that integration has to be there. This track facility also has Special Olympians. It has senior walkers. It has the road runners, because to be honest, track and field, if you add all those walkers and so forth, is the largest sport in Canada. They always talk about hockey or soccer now, but the reality is that it's there. It's also a sport that isn't as expensive. Ben talked about hockey. I used to pay $35, and the local Lions Club used to help support hockey, but now it's with travel, even volleyball. My former hockey coach, he brought his daughter to the OVA tournament in Toronto. It was $300 a night for a hotel, for each night for 3 nights. So that's $1,000, to pay for sport. So there's a lot of issues packed into that. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. And you raised so many good points, that idea that we are part of society, that sport needs to be, I love how you said it, convincing those who hold the purse strings. And we need to all do that. We were talking about that before the webinar started, about how to convince people that sport is part of the mission, right? It is not something that's kind of extra or on the side.
I think you have to integrate, like we have a Sikh community that's talking about a cultural event. When I talk to Indigenous people, they've run out of space for powwows. But in terms of reconciliation, in any of the events that we would have, they're talking about incorporating ceremony. And, I just came back from University of Waterloo convocation for my son, and it was the elder that opened it up and the elder that closed it. And it was a lesson on a great lesson for people of very diverse backgrounds in the crowd that need to be educated, or we have to relearn our history. It was fabulous.
Awesome. And so I'm going to ask, because I think we're kind of verging on this idea of, well, what's wrong with the system right now? What are some things we could address? The fact that we are operating within systems that have been around a long time, built on things that we need to learn how to transform and change. But what do you see as some of the biggest barriers? Maybe Lindsay, we could start with you, because I think you were really highlighting some of the ways we have to think about how we deliver sport that reflects what Peter's highlighting too, integrating.
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge here, which is probably echoed throughout Canada and maybe around the world, is that we're working to address barriers that we can't support as a sector. So, whether the barrier is access, financial, people meeting their basic needs first and don't have extra money to participate in a fee for use system that the sport system operates on, is probably the biggest barrier that we have. And no idea what the answer is without, collaboration from other areas of every sector and every level of government. So, lots of programs work to address these needs temporarily, which are great. And, there's lots of support financially. But, they are, participants that are operating or coming to these types of programs, it might only be enough fee to do 6 weeks of a program. They're not entering into a full dance year or a full hockey program always. So lots of these solutions are very short term and aren't really addressing some of the root issues that society is facing in general. So I know even with, like I was mentioning before, like the lifelong sport, so like supporting someone through lifelong sport and physical activity is also challenging because those barriers change throughout your life. And, it might be injuries, it might be your family, it might be all these different specific things that are going to impact. And everyone has 5 or 10 of those that move around within their life. And so how are we supporting every person? And we work a lot with people that are new or coming back into a sport system, so scaffolding that support to so lots of women that are, especially women that are coming in to try to participate, they're not just going to walk onto a sport field and say, here I am. So how are you supporting them to build the skills that they never maybe participated in or learned when they were younger, so that they feel confident enough to join a sport league? So there are quite a few sport leagues that do offer introductory, but it still can be extremely intimidating if you haven't played a sport before, don't know the rules, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, really putting so vulnerable. And so resources, emotional resources, but also the financial resources. We often talk about, and you've touched on this, all of you, this idea of, well, what is sport really for? We have these assumptions we're operating on, that it's fee for play. Why do we assume that? Why can't it be our human right or something that everybody has access to no matter what? And it's interesting. Same with education, right? So questioning these assumptions, and then and asking ourselves too, of what value is sport. So you're all arguing that it's much bigger than simply learning how to row fast or throw a ball or dance. It's a Zumba, right? It's way more than that. There's so much potential. And maybe if we can keep pushing that agenda, that the value of sport isn't just, winning something or being on the Olympic stage or on that medal table, it drives me crazy. Right. What else? What are some of the gaps in sport delivery do you see? Some of the barriers, some of the areas that we need to address that are making it difficult.
Just waiting to see if Benji's going to talk or not.
I'm letting you have this one, Daryl.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with Peter talking about the track, right, and having multiple uses for it, we're fortunate here in Victoria. We've got legacy buildings from the Commonwealth Games back in 1994. And, so the Commonwealth Place is just right around the corner from my house. And, we love it, right? It's not just a swimming pool, but, it's got all different types of programming for kids of all ages. It's got the library, right? It just brings everyone in from the community. And, it's huge, right? This summer we went to this outdoor water park in Langley, which was just amazing, super cheap, has water slides, costs $10, right? You get a 2-hour window and it has everything you'd like for swimming, right? It just gets people physically active, right? Getting them outside, right? Getting them out and about, right? I think it's just hugely important, and you don't have to be a top level athlete to participate in these things, right? In terms of what are some of the other gaps in the sport delivery, I think, that there's often roadblocks, right? If you're trying to make a change, you can run into all these roadblocks, or people are just used to doing it a certain way. And no matter how good your idea is, people are afraid of change, right? And it's too easy to say no instead of problem solving and trying to figure out, hey, how can we do this, right? What's another way to look at it, looking through another lens. And, unfortunately, you have a number of people who try to champion these new changes and try to help make these positive changes, and they run into too many roadblocks that it's, they just give up, right? You get too tired of having these challenges that it's just, okay, I guess I'll just go on my way, and I tried, right? And it's can be very frustrating. And I think just also having that focus, not just on the top end of people, but, that whole development, right? All layers of the pyramid in activity. The more people that we get active, the better society will be.
And there's a lot of lip service right now across the system for being more inclusive, having our doors open, we're welcoming, but are we really? And so back to Benji's point about how important it is to actually evaluate whether something's truly working. Are we more inclusive now, or what are the actual roadblocks? What's making it difficult? Like Lindsay's been studying and thinking and reflecting about, it's not just the money, but it's also the confidence, and how can we assist with that? So taking the time to actually reflect. But again, it has to be important to people for them to address it. Hey, what makes it difficult? What are you seeing, Benji, in your world? Makes it difficult for people to access sport or join in or enjoy it?
I think based off of my personal experience and just like things that I've noticed, I think I'm really gonna go along with Lindsay's point with financially. I think that might be the biggest barrier. And I think that's why we kind of need to focus the attention on enabling organizations, non-for-profits who are trying to do this work and providing resources like grants and all these different opportunities for them to be able to do what they need to do. But yeah, I think financials and outreach, like reaching out to the right, there's certain youth that don't even know these opportunities exist, right? And so I think that might be my biggest barrier in my experience, just making sure that the resources are there based off of finance, and making sure that, or trying to do a better job at outreach strategies and different ways to engage different communities, to intentionally engage different communities in certain sports, right? Like engaging girls in sports like hockey, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I taught middle school for years, and and Daryl will relate to this, where the power of tapping a kid on the shoulder and saying, hey, have you thought about coming out for the team tryout tonight? Have you ever thought about rowing? And just that connection, and they would show up. So that's all it ever took, is just a little bit of a nudge. And then once they're there, really, rally around, make sure they feel supported by other kids around them. And so they have the confidence Lindsay's talking about. And then I had a coach growing up. We were very poor, and one of the coaches made sure I could get to a camp, arrange the ride, rally money together so I could pay for it. Like, just looked after the kids in the village, right, to make sure it could happen. But says something about school sports, says something about clubs and community sport as well. And Patrick Levy, come on in. Great to see you. Got a hand.
Hi, Jen. Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity, the invite. And when we talk about resources, we have to talk about the human aspect, and not just financial and the equipment, but we need people to run the event, sometimes volunteers or paid coaches. And if you don't have proper coach, that can deter athletes from participating. I'm talking about disabled sports or para sports. You need coaches that are comfortable to teach or to deal with disabled athletes, that understand the body and the difficulties that the athlete can face, either doing the sport or just getting to the location. So that not having proper coaching can deter certain athletes from even participating. Or if there's no programs within the club, then where do those people, disabled athletes, go?
keep digging into this, so what gets in the way of us having the training that we need in all realms of sport? I don't like using the word level because I think they're all important. Wherever we are in sport is really important. So whether you're dealing with little 5-year-olds Timbit soccer, or you're dealing with a Paralympian like yourself, Patrick, right? So
I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet.
you're on your way. What is getting in the way of that kind of training, do you think, for people, not just, volunteers, but anybody who wants to play a role within the sport realm? Can we dig into that a little more?
I know that we've been trying to look at that here just because of the number of women that are in coaching and officiating roles is low, and it's not just here, it's everywhere. And we've been kind of trying to put together a project where we're looking at, do we make women or whoever is not participating in the system, if it's from different backgrounds, do we make them come into this system, or do we change the system to meet their needs? And what are the needs? Maybe women, for example, are transient in their participation just because of their life circumstances, and especially when people have families, you can see when women, even for me, I coached until I had my daughter, and then I stopped coaching after that. So how can we better make the system accommodate for people to come in and out, for example, when they're ready, and how can we make things changing? We talked about financial or coaching resources. We expect a lot from volunteers. We expect volunteers to pay for their own training. Sometimes we expect them to come for a whole season, and then on the other end, some get paid. So how can we look at these models and actually support people to enter into the system and maybe see it as a career instead of something they're just doing as a volunteer? And it's hard to maintain that for a long period of time.
If I may add something else that's necessary for athletes and coaches to be present, is a safe environment. And I think policies need to be in place to give that confidence that if there's an issue, the coach or the athlete knows that there's something in place that they can use to address those issues.
Yeah, definitely.
So what has worked? What are some of these kind of transformative experiences that you've witnessed? Lindsay's raised the idea of kind of responsiveness. You've all talked about having that kind of caring environment where you've got skilled, knowledgeable people who get that it's a holistic experience. Can you think of examples or memories of experiences you witnessed or taken part in that you see, there it is, that's sport at its best, and then some of these barriers being addressed at the same time? Anybody got some examples? That's why I give you these ahead of time, so I'm not putting people on the spot, but Patrick's got one actually on the spot. Go for it.
Over a year and a half ago, I participated at the Invictus Games in The Hague, where you're not looking at elite athletes, you're looking at participants that use sports to recover through their injuries, illness, or wounds. And so you have all sorts of people there of different levels of ability and disability, different ethnicities, languages, and sport brought everyone together. Regardless if it's a competition, it still brought everyone together, and we felt like a family. Yes, there's that competitive side, but there's still that community aspect, which brings everyone together, and actually brought the families together too, because it brings the family closer to the member who was participating, because the family sees the member going through a difficult time and overcoming those challenges. What we found difficult was after the games, when everyone goes back home and you had that high of the competition or the games, but then you're on your own, and that's where you notice that you need that community side, regardless if there's differences in your race, your sex, your gender, that sport removed all of that, all of those differences. And it's funny, like 2 days ago, I met the Duchess of York and sat with her for a good 30 minutes. And we actually talked about this, of what next after the games. on how to continue the use of sport and the support that's required, because a lot of people don't have the proper tools to continue on their own, or that they lose that sense of community.
It's really thinking about games or seasons or high school sport experiences or university, and how do we keep that, carry it on somehow, or maintain the connections that were sparked.
And someone earlier mentioned about sport has to be fun. Well, I've never had as much fun as I did at the games, and everyone left with on a high, like a good sensation. But it's not an addiction, but afterwards, if you don't have that, you're kind of searching for it.
Okay. Other comments on that? Experiences you've seen, witnesses, been part of?
I think for me, I touched on it briefly earlier, but we've had success, and sorry, Lindsay talked about it earlier, just trying to find volunteers, and whether it's for coaching or to host events and everything like that. I think you have to appreciate volunteers, right? They come back when they receive appreciation. So, I always made sure when I was hosting events that I never locked myself into a role, so that I could, A, put out fires, but B, show that appreciation to volunteers, whether you're bringing snacks over or see if they need to use the washroom or anything like that, right? It can be the smallest thing, or just saying hello or saying thank you for coming, right? We couldn't do this without you. It all adds up and makes them feel valued. And then, from a coaching standpoint, the number of kids that I've tapped on the shoulder say, hey, have you thought of coaching, right? We'd make our academy athletes at Claremont, a number of them, they'd come and coach the middle school students, right? And, we teach them how to, get their boating license, and then how to drive a boat, and then talk about, hey, what does it mean to be a coach? We're not just pushing them off and having them, figure it out on their own, but we talk about, hey, what are things that we can focus on today, right? And make sure that they feel supported. We're all kind of nearby, so if something happens, right, we talk through what happens in emergencies, but that way they can develop themselves and they're not feeling overwhelmed, or that I sit in the coach boat with them and just let them coach. Again, it just gives them those opportunities, and it's huge, right? We do other things with the high school program where we started saying, hey, anytime you want to do any coach education, we'll pay for half of it, right? You just fill in this form and, we'll send you a check, no problem, right? We wanted them to feel invested by paying for part of it themselves, so that they want to do it. And we just covered the other half, so that way they could move forward with it. It was less of a barrier. And, I'm still the owner of the form, so I get all the requests still on my email. But it's just nice to see that it's still going, and the number of people or number of times it's been accessed is huge, right? And it just, people keep developing, and that's helps us have more professional and more educated coaches to give a better experience to their athletes.
Looking for those opportunities, but then shaping the opportunity as well, right? Well, always this intentionality. And I'm seeing, thank you, Allison, you've shared a couple of examples of programming, but also this idea of thinking about sport more broadly, that it is a community, it belongs to the community, it's part of community. So then we got to think about the whole community. So with Peter's track, but also an event, we're thinking about everyone's engaged, yes, in watching, but also maybe some other things around that. Rugby does actually a really good job of that, because it is such a community event and they just have that mindset. Other examples where you've witnessed the transformative power of sport, it's been educational, it's developed a community, it's just worked well because of some of these factors that are in play.
I think the video that we shared at the beginning of that Enoch Cremation project, and again, this is not my project, but we were just partners on, but that was really different, and built on years of work by various organizations to revamp what Phys Ed 10 looks like as a mandatory course. And so they actually offered that on Fridays, and it was like a full day opportunity or a part day opportunity. And part of it would be including elders each day. They had a cultural component each day. They would often do a craft. They did a walk every day that they were within that program. But some of the unintentional outcomes, like I talked about before, where they did some powwow dancing and got some instruction on that. They made their some of their regalia pieces, or were able to learn some of that as well. And then some of the participants got a food handling certificate so that they could actually get a job and work the concession at the powwow in their community. I know the one of the instructors there that had a good relationship said that she actually ended up taking someone to get their driver's license because that's what they were hoping to do, and that would help them to gain some future employment. So I think that they're, just like Daryl was mentioning, there's lots of employment opportunities through the sport and physical activity recreation sector. And lots of these programs that we support sometimes do offer first aid training or other certifications, coaching certifications that might lead to future employment opportunities as well in and out of the sector.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of touch on something quickly with, first of all, Allison's comment on, using sport as making sport a community family affair. Something that we like to really do at MLSE Launchpad is try to engage parents and families as much as possible, right? And try to include everyone in the process, because I know from my experience when I was playing sport when I was younger, it felt like a very isolating experience because my parents didn't really know what's going on. And we have to always think about the people in this area of which we just have to think through to gain the opportunity. And so I think it's extremely important to figure out ways to engage communities so that the barrier of, okay, I want to play sport is decreased. Like my parents understand what's going on. They're involved. Need to understand they're involved. And then another thing is you guys see as a town collaboration and partnerships, there's with different communities of the system, individuals with organizations that are similar things. It is really hard to find culture and volunteers sometimes to different places. And I know we ran a program in Estonia, where the parents, how are you going to get people to go that? And so we need to intentionally create ways in which we go to different places and such those food collaboration. And also figuring out ways where we can engage the community more. But yeah, thank you for that comment, Allison. That really touched on something for me.
Yeah, it's a mindset, hey? And the more we can share that mindset or expect it or embed it in all that we do across sport. Peter made the comment earlier too, and many of you are echoing the importance of alignment. So whether we think about federal to the municipal and local club levels, but also just aligning and thinking about aligning with parents, aligning with the schools and the teachers and the coaches and the volunteers, and then who else is in the community who might have either an interest or a stake, okay? That we need to think about who might want to be invited in, and just get creative about that, right? Expand our consciousness about the possibility of sport once we have this mindset.
And I think too, not being afraid to try something, especially when you're working with a new population. I know a lot of groups that we support are doing pilot type programs, and sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes the barriers they thought were going to be barriers weren't. I know a program ran with some new Canadian teen girls, and it was going great, a drop-in program, until it got cold and they did not want to take the bus, and there was nothing that could be done to get them on that bus in Edmonton in the winter. So they just resumed it in the spring when it warmed up. That was the solution there. So sometimes you don't even know what those barriers might be, and not being afraid to try again and learn and keep continuing on until you're able to meet the needs of that group.
Yeah, which is what sport teaches us, right? All the time. Yeah. Any other final words or comments on this concept of sport as a medium for education, as an environment of education? I feel like that's actually a really great place to stop with Lindsay's point about what sport teaches us. Sometimes you can't know those unintentional outcomes, the unexpected, you think unpredictable, but sport has all the answers really if we just learn from it and listen to it and apply it to our world. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to wrap up there, and great to hear from Patrick and Peter as well, and Allison, who's been posting in the chat. I really appreciate this great community because I do see, you know, Clarence and Francis, great to see you. These are names that I have gotten to know because of this community that we're building in having these important conversations, and across all across Canada. So many of these conversations are going. I really want to encourage everybody to take what we heard today and try to do our best creatively to spread the word and impact mindsets so that we think about sport more completely and more expansively as such a power tool, right? Take care, everybody. Good to see you all. And thanks again. Thanks to Ariana for her support through the webinar.